Before you start the day, we have walked over the sets. We know roughly what the sets look like. We know roughly what the scene that is going to be played in that room. We don't know the detail of it. That will come later in the day. But first in the morning, you are aware that the right pieces of equipment are in the right places. Do we have a crane first thing in the morning? It's all those little things, because at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is make time for the director, really. Because when they say turn over, it's his time. And they would like to use every single minute of it.
Before you get there, you've obviously got to be very prepared. So you know the part of the scene that you're going to be shooting. If it's a particularly difficult one and it's the first time on a particular location or a set, you may get there a little bit earlier to discuss with your DOP how we're going to go about shooting the scene. Main thing is you have a good breakfast, because you don't know when you're going to get off the camera. So you have to be sort of mentally prepared and physically prepared for the day. And you also have to check in with your camera crew to check that they know that you've got all the right camera equipment in the right combination, if you've got special rigs that day, if you're going to have to swap a camera out from a handheld mode to a Steadicam mode to a studio mode, that they've got all of the combinations and they're aware of it. The preparation for the day is very important. Big budget feature films, we're very fortunate to have all of the equipment either sitting on the truck or, in close proximity, and hopefully enough camera crew to make anything happen that we want to. I mean, we carry all the accessories for handheld, usually carrying other things, Steadicam, maybe a gimbal, a remote head, a crane. You've got all of the tools there. So if there's a change in the plan, which that's what filmmaking's about, being able to change your opinion, and attitude towards a scene. The director just has a thought in the car on the way to set, says, what, I'm thinking this the wrong way, I need to do it this way. So we have to respond, and on the bigger films, then you have the resources, you have the experience, the know-how, and you can switch.
Sometimes we end up with the wrong equipment, there's no question about it, but we still have to do it. Do you know what I mean? It's just
you have to make it work.
I keep going on about narrative, but it depends what you're doing. Sometimes you have very heavy cameras, but the nature of the narrative of the story means that the camera can be a little bit sort of wild, because it doesn't matter how fit you are. If you shoot 10 hours with a heavy camera on your shoulder, let me tell you, there will be a take that will be 2 minutes, and at the last 30 seconds, you're just hanging on for dear life.
I think it's more of an issue for maybe indie films, maybe the ambitions outstretch the resources that the production have, so the director may come up with a shot that is way beyond the capabilities of the crew and the equipment that they have. They have to find another way around shooting something, and they have to use that kind of indie ingenuity to create something. It also depends on how flexible a director and a DOP might be. If you say, well, we can't do it this way, but we can do it that another way. We're always in a position, I always think, of giving answers instead of problems. If you can see a problem, or we can't shoot this for whatever reasons, a bumpy floor, we need to run a dolly, we can't build a dance floor quickly enough, we haven't got a remote head, you can't say, well, we can't do it. You just have to say, well, maybe if we try this or we try that.
The ideas come fast and furious sometimes, and you have to make it work with whatever you have. I've been on jobs where I arrived, and the brief that I had was that I had to do about 85% of the film handheld. I didn't know that, but in those days we were using Panaflexes with Primo lenses, and that's really heavy. But then I had a great grip, and he would hold half of the camera for me while I was doing the shot, because it was impossible to do it, So you know, you find the solution. There is always a way.
You're the facilitator between these two creative people that are trying to tell a story. And you're also a kind of bridge between their aims and ambitions and how they go about it and the rest of the camera crew, art department, props, electrical. They all have questions, and as you're sitting looking through the camera, they come to you and they don't bother the DOP necessarily.
And you have to be able to talk to the different departments. So you are a craftsman, and obviously you have the input from the director and the director of photography, huge input, you know, so you know roughly what is it that is going to be achieved. So sometimes the director might come to you and say, I want the camera over here, you know, and the director of photography doesn't know that. You have to involve them in the conversation in a very diplomatic way before it's decided. One of the things about experienced people is that whatever they do, they make it look so easy. And you get that with a crew. It's like a difficult shot. Well, what is a difficult shot? But if you've got really experienced people, you look at it on the screen and it looks very easy. But it could be one take. I mean, this guy is on it, you know, very long takes that are incredibly demanding, you know, like what he did on a tournament. But you look at it and you don't see the other half. The debris that he leaves behind, crew, vehicles. You got to know the style of what is been shooting, what a camera is doing, you know, the movement that Pete will put into a movement, because that's the narrative of the story. You know, there's no point in Pete doing a beautiful developing shot and I'll come in and wave the camera around, because it just won't cut. Sometimes I got to do a shot that Pete did the reverse on, so I got to understand what he did before, how did he frame it, so when something is cut, it's actually pleasing to the eye. The camera work goes through different fashions, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
We are asked to do things that sometimes is to do with fashion, you know what I mean? It's like we went through the whole period of handheld. Everybody wanted to do handheld because it was fashionable, I don't know. There was another period where everybody was with a Steadicam, you know? There was another period that, especially in American films, that everything had to be on cranes.
Polanski or whatever said that a beautiful shot can ruin a perfectly good movie.
Exactly.
That's the thing, is that knowing when something is good enough and when it tells the story.
I think the digital world, with all the post-production work that they do now, they create these perfect images that sometimes you look at them and it's like reverting back to the sort of, there was a period in the 70s where British films were beautifully framed and photographed and everything, but they all became exactly the same. So maybe that's the market that they go for, the expectation of what they're going to see.
Now, though, it's different, isn't there? There's a new category of almost cinema going. You're working in an industry that is entertainment. It's not necessarily art. And it's an industrial process. And this is why, you know, we're told we have a page count of 4 pages, 3 pages, whatever, and we have to make that day because that's what it says on the production schedule. And, you know, you have to give up maybe on shots that are perfectly executed, and you just go, well, it's good enough, you know, because we're going to make the day by doing it.